my requirement of accounts, what about chart of accounts? So to be able to explain you the chart of accounts, I will have to take you through how the creation of main accounts process was designed earlier in the previous versions of AX, or D365 Finance and Operations. So let us take an example here. I have two legal entities in Contoso demo data. One is Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, which is called as USMF company, and I do have Contoso Systems Retail USA. This is called as USRT. So if you look at the chart of accounts, or if you look at the main accounts that are needed in this company, I need travel expense account, and I will need accounts payable, receivable accounts, the bank account, cleaning expenses account, and all these. And I need many more accounts in this company. And I do have this same requirement even in the other company, that is USRT company. So both being the legal entities established in the United States, my requirement of accounts is almost same, right? Then what we used to do in the prior versions of finance and operations, like AX 2009 versions, what we used to do is we used to create these accounts in both companies separately. So I'll have to go to my USMF company and create all these accounts. That might be like 100 or 200 different accounts, and I will have to create all of them even in the USRT company, right? Even if you are using some sort of data importing tools, then you will have to import them into USMF company firstly, and then you might also have to import them into your USRT company, right? So this was obviously a tedious process, not only for the first time use, but think about it. Tomorrow, I need another account in both the companies, right? Then I will have to create that in the USMF company, and then I will have to create it even in USRT company. Okay, Microsoft has brilliantly thought about this and came up with a solution. So that is this chart of accounts concept. So let me take you to the demo data so that we can see how this problem is addressed and how is it easy for you guys or for the businesses to create these chart of accounts at one place and still be able to allow your different legal entities to share these chart of accounts, right? I'm taking you to the application now, and let us take a look at the chart of accounts. So I go to the modules and then general ledger, under which I will go to this chart of accounts. So if I have to create main accounts, firstly, I will have to create the chart of accounts. So for example, for your newly created company, like that SGPC company, if you need a chart of accounts, you will have to create a new chart of accounts called COA for Singapore chart of accounts, right? And I've saved it. So firstly, I'll have to create this before I create the main accounts. Fine. So I will not create the main accounts now. Let us firstly review the chart of accounts that are available. You look at this one here. This chart of accounts name is India chart of accounts, under which I have a lot of main accounts. I have some accounts for my trade receivables. I have an account for cash and cash equivalent, like this. Whatever the accounts that I need, all of the accounts are created under the India chart of accounts. Obviously, we are talking about the demo data here, but that is fine. Let us assume that we created this chart of accounts. Then let me take you to the INMF company, which is my Indian legal entity. So when I go there, let me open up the ledger form. I go to the modules and I go to the general ledger, under which I will go to this ledger form. I believe that you remember this form, where when I was discussing about this form, I talked about this chart of accounts. I told you that we will talk about this chart of accounts later, right? And this is the right time that we talk about it. So if you look at this INMF company, my chart of accounts name is set to India. So because of the reason my Indian legal entity is pointing to this chart of accounts, so that means my INMF company will be using the accounts that are available under this particular chart of accounts. Okay, and let's take another example now. So similarly for a Malaysian company, I have another chart of account. So if I go to Malaysia company, I will have that Malaysian company is tagged to the Malaysian chart of accounts. And what about sharing? We talked about sharing capability, right? So let's take a quick look at this one now. I have another chart of accounts in the demo data, which is called shared. So forget about this name. This name doesn't really matter, right? I will take you now to USMF company, and at the same time, I will also take you to USRT company. Okay, so let's take a look at this one now. In the USMF company, look at this legal entity name, that is Contoso Entertainment System USA. And here, this is my Contoso Retail, different legal entities, right? But if you look at them, both of them are pointing to the same chart of accounts called shared. You see, this is the thing that we were talking about. And in the example that we were talking about, we talked about the chart of accounts being almost same. I mean, the main accounts being same in both legal entities, right? So I have one chart of accounts created, which is called shared. I can actually name it anything. For example, I could have called this as chart of accounts for US entities, and then I could have I will be able to tag them in both the legal entities, right? So that way you will create all the main accounts only once, and still you allow your multiple legal entities to use the same accounts, right? So with this, what happens is that tomorrow, if I want to create another main account in both the companies, I will have to create them only once. I will have to create it only once, and it appears in both the legal entities. Okay. So I will show you a quick example here. I have this Chinese chart of accounts, right? And when I go to these companies, I go to the general journal. Under general ledger, I am going to journals, and then if I go to the lines, okay, let's do one thing. Let us quickly create a new journal. And go to lines here. If I click this list of accounts here, do you see this account 1001? You're not seeing it, right? Even if I try to search for 1001, I will not be able to see it. You see, it's trying to filter 1001 account, and I'm not able to see it because my USMF company is associated to my shared chart of accounts, and that is the reason I'm seeing only the accounts that are available under this particular chart of accounts, right? And the brilliant thing with this one is, even if my chart of accounts is shared with two companies, still I have certain amount of control. Like, for example, I'm creating a new account called event expenses. So let us assume that Contoso Entertainment Systems USA is planning for an event, and their account number is something like 70100. And this account is not at all needed for this company. And in such cases, I do not want to allow my USRT company to see this main account. In such cases, I will be able to control this. Though my chart of accounts is shared, I can still say that this particular account should not be shown to the USRT company. So that way, when my 80% of the accounts are same in both the companies, then I can create one single chart of accounts and still share it to both the companies. And whatever the 20% accounts that are different, I can still control them. I can create them and make them available only for certain legal entity for which the account should be accessible, right? So that is how the chart of accounts is designed. So now we created this new chart of accounts, right? What I will do is I will quickly create a new main account called 615000 travel expenses, and we will talk about the different fields in main accounts in our next video. But for now, I'm just quickly creating a new main account, and I'm closing this, right? So this is how you will create a chart of accounts, and then you will create main accounts under that particular chart of accounts. And I wanted to show you a couple of more places. So you close this form and you go to the general ledger module and open up this main accounts. So if you open up this main accounts, you will see the main accounts which are under your selected chart of accounts. For example, in the USMF company, we had shared as our chart of accounts, right? And that is the reason I'm seeing that as a shared name here, and all the accounts that are available under shared are being visible here. Even if I try to create a main account from here, because this is another place from where you can create your main account. When I say new from here, it already started here. So this new account that I'm creating, that will be available in both places. Let's say I'm going to create a new account called 75000 event expenses, right? So I have created this, and we talk about the other fields later. This new account that I created, I am going to the USRT company here, and even from here, if I open up the main accounts, I'm already in the main account form, but I'm just taking you to the same place so that you know that we are in the USRT company and going to the main accounts. So here, if you search for your newly created account, you have that, right? But in our next video, we'll see like how can we make it available only in the USMF company. Okay, so that is about how the main accounts are coming up when we create them in one company. How are they ending up in another company as well? But at the same time, we created our new chart of accounts, right? Let's go to our chart of accounts and look for our newly created chart of accounts for Singapore. Oh, sorry, this is the one that we created just now. So this is the new account that we created in this chart, under this chart of accounts, right? Now what we do is, I have created a test company just to show you like how does it work, right? So let me go to the legal entities, and then I created a test legal entity, and it has nothing in it for now. And obviously, since this form is shared form, you're seeing this data, but otherwise this is a fresh legal entity that is created. Now what I will do is I will go to the modules and go to general ledger, and I will try to open up this main account. So system tells me that you must select a chart of accounts, right? Because this is not configured. Now I will go to the ledger form. So here, I will tell the system that my test company should be using the chart of accounts that I created just now. Okay, and I'm randomly selecting some calendar that we created last time. You see, I've saved it. And it is asking for the accounting currency. I want the accounting currency to be Singapore dollar, since this company is established in Singapore and the reporting currency is US dollar. So this is fine. Now, what we do is, let's go to our main accounts. You see, you are seeing only one account, right? So that is how your chart of accounts should be set up and your main accounts to be created. So only this one will show up for you when you create a new general journal now. All right, so this is how you do it. And I would like to end this video with another small setup. In the previous videos, you created a new legal entity called SGPC, right? I mean, we created it, right? So I go to the ledger form. So basically, I can select my newly created chart of accounts here. But in the previous video, I've selected this to be shared legal entity, because if I select this one, I will have to create all the accounts now, because it takes a lot of time. But at the same time, you have to know how do you create them. So that is the reason we created a new chart of accounts and we associated it to our test company. But when it comes to our practice company, that is Singapore legal entity, you choose the shared chart of accounts itself. In my previous video itself, I've selected this for you. So I've just recreated the legal entity so that you will be able to better understand it. So, right. So with this, your SGPC is now ready with even the chart of accounts. All right. So that's all for this session. In the next video, we will look at how do we create main accounts and understand different setups that you have under main accounts. That's all. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. In this video, we will see how do you create main accounts. Okay, so my intention is that I want to create a new account into USMF company. Okay, so firstly, go to your ledger form to see what is the chart of accounts being used for this company. So I go to ledger and I see that shared is my chart of accounts, correct? So I will have to create my main account as part of this chart of accounts. Only then that can come to this USMF company. Okay, so let's go to the chart of accounts. So I go to the chart of accounts and I have many chart of accounts here. So out of them, I go to this shared and I'll start creating my new main account here. Okay, so trigger the new button and let's give an account number. So I'm just creating a bank account USD. Okay, so just save this and your new account is ready now. All right, so let's look at some of the important fields that need to be looked into. So the first and foremost is your account type. So you can choose your account type here. If you want this account to be part of your P&L, profit and loss, then you can choose this to be profit and loss account type. So within P&L, if you are specific about if it is a revenue account or expense account, you can choose either revenue or expense. So similarly, you can choose either balance sheet, or else within balance sheet, if you want to be specifically create this as an asset account or liability account, you can appropriately make your selection. Okay, so after that, if you want this account to be available for a certain period, then you can set up some active from and active to dates here. So only during that period, this account will be active. All right. So firstly, let's set this account type as asset because it is a bank account, right? So I saved the record. And what we do is, let us try to create a journal and see if this account is available now. So I go to the journals in the other tab. So create a new journal. Right. So here, let's see if our new account is available now. So this is our account number. So I entered the account number and you see here, this is a new account that we created and it is available. All right. So this is how you create your new main account. And let us now look at some more fields that we should be knowing in the accounts. So some of the significant fields that you would use in your implementations is debit or credit requirement. So you might want to say that this account is eligible only for credit transactions. Then you can set up the credit here, which means only the credit transactions can get posted into this account and no debit transactions. All right. And the balance control. So sometimes you may use this balance control. So what happens is, let me just explain with an example. So this is your bank account. So just assume that you have 1,000 USD balance in this particular account, and somebody is trying to post a transaction, and they're trying to do a credit of 1,200 USD. So this will push the account balance into the credit, isn't it? So it's nothing but if you post this transaction, the balance in the account would become minus 200, isn't it? Because you're trying to do a credit of 1,200, while the balance is only $1,000. So you don't want the account balance to get into the credit. Okay, so in such cases, you can use this balance control where you will say that the balance control is debit. So always make sure that the balance remains in debit. So that is what we are saying. So like that, you can use both this debit or credit requirement and balance control. Okay, so let's quickly check these two things right away. So firstly, I'll leave this balance control to empty. So let's go to this one here, the journal voucher. So let's save our setting, this debit or credit requirement. So I'm choosing this account. So what I'm trying to do now is I will try posting a debit entry here. Okay, so let's try posting this transaction and see. Yeah, so you can see system is giving me some problem. Let's take a look at it. So what it is telling me is this main account combination is set up to be used only for transactions. Okay, so because of the reason it is set to allow only credit transactions, I'm currently not allowed to make the debit transactions into this account. All right, so similarly, let's also give it a quick try with the balance control. So I will leave this to empty here because I don't want to confuse you with many parameters being together. So let's use only the balance control to be debit here. Okay, so technically speaking, the debits can be posted now, but the thing is, what we are saying, the balance must always remain in debit. That's what we are saying. Let's try this out now. So make sure that this setting is saved, and I'm just reselecting the same account so that the setup that we changed just now can be applied to the journal. Right. So what I do is I'll try to put a $200 credit and then try to post this. Yeah, so you can see system is again giving me a problem here. It says a requirement for debit balance is selected, but this transaction will push the balance into minus $200. So certainly that is correct, right? You have the $0 balance right now, and if you post this $200 credit transaction, it would become minus 200, right? So that is the reason system is not allowing us to do that. All right, so that is how some of these fields can be used. So please ignore this debit or credit default. You don't really need it. And you can set up the default currency. So if you want to allow the US dollar transactions by default, then you can set up the default currency as US dollar. So whenever you're creating the transaction and choosing this particular account, system can show you the default currency as US dollars. So that must be available somewhere here. Yeah, so you have this currency here, right? So the default currency can be defaulted here. All right, so similarly, you have the default offset account. So you can set up a default offset account, and you can use this suspended flag. So sometimes you don't want people to post transactions into that particular account. Then you can mark this account as suspended so that nobody can post transactions into that account. And another main thing is the category. You can categorize your accounts. So attach these bank accounts to the available categories. So you can say that, yeah, that is part of your cash or cash equivalents category. Okay, so this categories is a master form. So you can go to the cash categories and then create your own categories for your implementation. All right, done. And another important setup is this do not allow manual entry. Basically, there will be certain control accounts. So you have your accounts payable or accounts receivable accounts. So in general, the transactions will get posted into these accounts payable accounts through a subledger. Okay, so I'll just take you to the accounts receivable account that we have. So you see here in the Contoso demo data, you have this accounts receivable domestic account, so which says do not allow manual entry, right? So if you try taking this account in the journal transactions, let's do it quickly. So system will not allow you to take those accounts when you're posting the journals, because any transaction that comes into your accounts receivable account, that should come from your customer subledger, where the customer must be selected, and the transaction that is getting posted should trigger the transaction into your main account. So you will understand, in detail about the general ledger and subledger concepts in the next part. But now let's just quickly see how this do not allow manual entry would work. So I go to this journal and let's clear off these messages, and I'll try to use this account. Yeah, you see here, the moment that I try selecting this account, system tells me that this account is not allowed for manual entry. Okay, so this is how you can use various fields in the main account. All right, so that's all for this video, and thank you so much. In this video, let us understand the legal entity overrides. So before I show you something in the application, I would like to just remind you about the main accounts concept quickly. So when you're working in a multi-company implementation scenarios, it's pretty common that you'll have your company 1 and you'll have your company 2, and both will be using the same chart of accounts, right? So you will be creating only one single chart of accounts, and you will be linking this chart of accounts in ledger form for both companies, which you're already familiar with, right? And even when you take the Contoso demo data, you have your USMF company and USRT company. Okay, so both of them will use a chart of accounts called shared, right? So in such cases, it is possible that sometimes there could be certain things that you want them to be legal entity specific. So which means I want to override settings per legal entity. Okay, so to have those scenarios implemented, you will use the legal entity overrides. So just give you another example. Let's assume that you have an account, the one that we created just before. You have this 110175 as your account. So you want this account to be available for users only in USMF, but not in USRT. Okay, so in such cases, you can control that using the legal entity overrides. Okay, so let's take a look at it, like what all can we do using the legal entity overrides. So I'm going back to my main accounts form. So this is the account that we created just now. Okay, so if you scroll it down, you have this legal entity overrides section. So here I say that I want to set up the override for a specific company. Let's search for USRT. So select this legal entity. So I'm telling the system that the setup that I'm doing now is specific to this company. Okay, so here I can go ahead and say that this is suspended for USRT. So only when USRT user comes in and then uses this account for transactions, then they'll get the error message that this is suspended. But it is fine in the US company, so USMF company. All right. So another widely used function is setting up the default dimensions per legal entity. So I created another legal entity override here for USMF company. So I go to the default dimensions and I can choose this default business unit, department, or cost center. Okay, so we discussed about the financial dimensions in detail in the next part, but this is just a basic understanding that you have these financial dimensions where you can set up the default financial dimensions here. Okay, so I go ahead and say that this is a default value for the business unit, like 002. I say okay, right? So whenever user chooses the USMF company and create the journals, then this is the business unit be defaulted in the journals. Okay, let's try to give it a shot in the voucher. So what I do is I go and choose this, and you see here, the moment that I chose this account, automatically the business unit is defaulted. All right. So that is how you can use the legal entity override setup. So similarly, you can also play with the active from and active to dates for the specific company. And you can also deal with the allocation terms. All right. So you will learn about the allocation terms later. So that's all for this video, and thank you so much. In this video, let us understand the basics of currencies. Okay, so by this time, I am sure that you know that D365 allows the multi-currency transactions, correct? So currently we are dealing with the USMF company, right? And this uses US dollars as the accounting currency. Okay, and it is quite possible that you will be able to post the transactions in non-USD currency, right? So let's go and take a look at our journal. So I'll just quickly create one transaction for you. So if you take a look at this here, I have this account, and when I'm entering the transaction, so I can set up the currency here as euros. Okay, so I'm telling the system that I am posting this transaction in euro currency, correct? So the moment that you choose this to be a euro currency, then I can see that whatever the value that I provide here, that is converted into the USD value. So you have this 1,000 euros, which is nothing but this 1369 US dollars. Okay, so on journals, you will see the currency conversion rate here. Okay, so this is the currency conversion, which says that the currency conversion between the USD and euro is this. Right? So certainly for all of this to happen, being consultants, we will have to configure the currencies, exchange rates, etc. Okay, so that is where we are looking at some of the configurations now. Firstly, let me introduce you to the currencies area within the application. So within General Ledger module, you scroll it to the right, and then you see this currencies section. Okay, so the first thing is you have a currencies master. So you go to the currencies and you see the different currencies listed here. So you don't need to create all of these currencies manually. So with the default setup, I mean, when you purchase the D365 license, so though you do not load the demo data, you will have these currencies by default coming in your currencies master. Okay, so certain fields that you might need to be just, have an idea about is this rounding rules. So you will be able to provide the rounding rules here. Okay, so especially, when the currency conversions happen, there will be decimal places, right? So there could be some 100.10, something like that. So in such scenarios, how do you want the rounding to be handled? So you can set up the rounding rules here for different documents like sales orders, what is your rounding principle is, and for purchase orders and fixed asset depreciations, etc. Okay, so that is the only piece that I would say will be needed for you guys as consultants. So that is about the currencies master. And now let's take a look at the exchange rate types. Okay, I will have to again take my Excel to explain you about these exchange rate types. This is similar to the concept of the chart of accounts. Okay, so what happens is you have your multiple companies, especially in a scenario where you're implementing to multiple legal entities. So you have your USMF and USRD companies, and you want both companies to follow the single currency conversion rate. So you don't want to go to each company and define what is your currency conversion. So what Microsoft did is they came up with a similar configuration approach, the exchange rate types. Okay, so and for purchase orders and fixed assets like sales orders. So you can set up the rounding rules here for different documents like sales orders, what is your rounding principle is, and for purchase orders and fixed asset depreciations, etc. Okay, so that is the only piece that I would say will be needed for you guys as consultants. So that is about the currencies master. And now let's take a look at the exchange rate types. Okay, I will have to again take my Excel to explain you about these exchange rate types. This is similar to the concept of the chart of accounts. Okay, so what happens is you have your multiple companies, especially in a scenario where you're implementing to multiple legal entities. So you have your USMF and USRD companies, and you want both the companies to follow the single currency conversion rate. So you don't want to go to each company and define what is your currency conversion. So what Microsoft did is they came up with a similar configuration approach like the chart of accounts. What you do is you define something called exchange rate type. Okay, and within that exchange rate type, you define your currency conversions, like between USD to Euro and USD to INR. Let's say this is my conversion rate, and here this is my conversion rate, something like this, right? So you are giving a name to this exchange rate type called default, and then what you do is you will link this to your USMF and USRT companies. Then automatically what system can do is it can look into this table and it can pick up the exchange rates. Okay, let's just see this in the system to get more familiar with this. So you look at this one here. I have the exchange rate table, and within that, let's review this default exchange rate type. And I have this exchange rates, and this is where I can define the currency conversions. Okay, so you take a look at this one. So it begins with USD here. Yeah, you take a look at this one here. So this is the currency conversion for USD and Euro. Okay, and this is the conversion value. All right. So this is how you define your currency conversions, the exchange rates. Okay, and let's review how this default is connected to the USMF company. All right. So let me just go to another tab. Let us go to the General Ledger module. Here I go. Scroll it and find your ledger. So as consultants, when we are setting up the ledger form, what we do is we will tell the system what is the exchange rate type that has to be used. So you see here, so here it is pointing to the default table. So now whenever we are doing the transactions, system knows that yes, it has to look for the default exchange rate type. Okay, so then system gets into this exchange rate type and go to this default and looks into this exchange rates. Okay, so that is conceptually that is how it works. Now, what we do quickly is, let us see how do you create a new conversion rate, okay, and how is this conversion is happening, correct? So let us go back to the currency exchange rates, and here, between USD and Euro, so you have the currency conversion factor. So how do you want to define your currencies? I mean, how do you want to define your exchange rates? So is it like, do you want to say that how many euros for 100 USD or how many euros for 1 USD? So that is what will be determined by the currency conversion factor. So you can see here, I defined the exchange rate here as 73 here, which is like 73 euros for 100 US dollars. Okay, so if we want to be in a position to define the conversion factor for 1 unit, then you see here, you set up the conversion factor for 1 unit. And you see here, for 1 US dollar, how many INR? Okay, so what I want to do now is, I want to define a different currency rate between USD and INR. So I come to this table, USD and INR, and I add the exchange rate, and I say that this is applicable from today's date, and the exchange rate is, by the way, whenever you want to say that it is from today's date, you can just type in T here, that automatically gets you the current date, and here I put the currency conversion rate is 73. Okay, so that is 73. Okay, so that is 73 INR for 1 USD. Okay, so if I want that to be typically showing up in 100 units, then I can put it to 100 here, and you see here the values are converted to this. Okay, so let's leave it to this. Done. And let's go back to the journal voucher and see how the system gets the new value. So the same 1000 transaction that we are posting here, I'm telling the system that this is INR. Okay, so you go to the conversion, and you see here system is giving the conversion as between USD to INR is this. Okay, so certainly it can do that calculation for you, because the way that we defined is there is 73 INR for 1 USD, right? Then the transaction that we are entering right now is 1000 INR. So what is the value of it in US dollar, correct? So it can automatically do that thing like 1 divides by 73, which is this, and that is what is the conversion value you're seeing here. Okay, and multiplied by 1000 is this value. Okay, so that is how you can define the currency exchange rates in D365. I believe you're clear, and that's all for this video. Thank you so much. Let us review how can we import the currency conversion rates using finance and operations now. Okay, firstly, let's go to the manual way of creating the currency conversions. So I go to the general ledger, and what you do is you go to your exchange rate types and choose the appropriate one, get into the exchange rates. And so if in case you're creating a new conversion, what you do is you're going to choose the from currency and to currency, and then start creating your currency conversion. Okay, so for the time being, let us go and choose the Euro and the Russian rubles conversion that is available here. So you see here that was last updated only in conversion that is available here. So you see here that was last updated only in this date. So if in case you will have to do data, so we have these only in 2013 available here. So you see here that was last updated only in 2013. So since it is demo data, so we have these updated only until this date. So if in case you will have to do the currency conversion, you will have to add the new currency conversion. What you do is, which you have already seen, you come and add the currency conversion here, right? But just imagine how tedious the process is going to be if you will have to do it for all of your currency conversions. Okay, so all of this between Canadian dollars and your INR, so all of this. So that is the reason you can use the import facility that is available. So before we take a look at it, just remember this current exchange rate that is available. So we will see after effects after importing it. So I'm just duplicating, I'm sorry. I'll just duplicate this. So let us go to the general ledger area. And so the first thing is you'll have to configure the exchange rate providers. Okay, so by default, our finance and operations will give you a couple of options. One is the Central Bank of Russian Federation, or else when you click the new, you're going to see another one on the rates. My pronunciation could be bad, but this is what this one is here. So you go ahead and say okay. So what it does is it will create the respective URLs for you. Okay, so if in case you want to use the different providers, I believe that would be the case in many implementations. So you will need to take your developer help to be able to have those new exchange rate providers added here. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I have these exchange rate providers and I want to import the currency rates using these providers. So I go to the import currency exchange rates. So you tell the system that the exchange rates need to be imported into which exchange rate type. So I want them to be imported into this default, and what is the provider to be used? So I choose this one for time being, and import as of today's date. So I want the today's rates to be picked up by the system. Okay, and if there are no currency pairs available, for example, you did not create that currency pair like Euro and Russian rubles, then it can create it for you. And you can override the exchange rates that are already available, are already created by the user, so you can choose to override them. Okay, so let's go ahead and say okay here. And the system takes a minute to process. So you see some messages here. Okay, so some of them could not be updated. Otherwise, 33 number of exchange rates were imported. Okay, so let's go to the exchange rates table, and this is what is the one that I'm interested to look at right now. Let me just refresh this. You see here. So the currency conversion is imported by the system. So this way, you will be able to import the currency conversion rates from the online providers. Okay, so that's all for this video, and thank you so much. Welcome back. In this video, we will talk about voucher templates. Usually, there will be a lot of recurring transactions in the organizations. So those could be your rent expenses, or else some cleaning expenses, or whatnot. There can be many such transactions where you will need to be entering it periodically, right? So voucher templates is a way that reduces the end user's time in creating these entries in the system. Okay, so let's take a quick look at it. I am in general journals now, and I have a journal created to best utilize your time. So I click on these lines, and you take a look at this journal that I created. Okay, so this is a cleaning expenses account, and if you take a look at this one here, so there is a cleaning expenses account and the business unit is selected. So there are two business units that are selected. So whenever the cleaning expenses happen, I want that expense to be distributed between these two business units, and that is being paid from my petty cash. Okay, or else any other account for that matter. So this is my entry. So I'm crediting this account and debiting these two business units, correct? So what I can do is, this is a transaction that I'll be frequently entering. Okay, then what I can do, I can go and save this as a template. By clicking on this functions and voucher template, right? So you see this save voucher template, right? So you are trying to save this voucher as a template. So I click on this, and you see this form opens up, and it will ask you the template type. So whether you want to save this as a percent-based template, or else do you want to save this as an amount-based template. So if you say percent, then you can still reuse the similar entry, but the amount can be entered by you. For example, right now your expense is $5,000, and if you want to put a $10,000 expense, that will be allowed using the percent. So if you say this is amount-based template, so the amount gets stored basically. Okay, so every time that you try to reuse this template, that's going to be with the same value that the system will try to utilize the template. Okay, so let's try to save this as a percent-based template. All right. So by the way, you take a look at this one here. The journal number is 725. So let's try to say okay. Yeah. So this is saved. So now this is saved as a template. All right. So what do we do is, let's go to the different tab, and I'll create a new journal now. Okay. transaction. After this transaction, create a new journal now. Okay, so I'm coming and entering this transaction, let's say after a week, and I got a similar transaction after a week where I'll need to enter this cleaning expenses. So instead of entering the transaction from the scratch, what I can do is I can make use of the template that I created. So I go to this functions and say, this time I'm telling the system to fetch the voucher template. I'll click on the select voucher template. That will show me the templates that are available. So you take a look at this one here. This is the journal batch number, all right? So you see the similar transaction that we entered, correct? So I tell the system, yeah, fetch this template, then it will ask me the amount now because of the reason we said it is a percent-based template. I can enter what is the expense this time. So I can say 10. In the same, I can enter what is the expense this time. So I can say 10,000. So that will be distributed in the same proportion that we saved the voucher template, right? So you see this? So the 10,000 is being credited from this account, and you see two entries with $5,000. All right. So this is how you can use the voucher template to reduce the data entry time for recurring transactions. I know there could be some sort of questions that can we see the template name? Can we set up a name to it? Unfortunately, we don't have that functionality for the voucher template, but there is also another way of managing your recurring transactions or periodic entries, which you will see in the next video. Right? So this is just one way of doing it, and I believe personally there is a better way of doing it using the periodic journals. Okay, so we will take a look at that one in the next video. Thank you so much. Let us take a look at the periodic journal to understand how can we better manage the recurring transactions in the system, right? So I will take you to the general ledger module, and within journal entries, you have these periodic journals. All right, so just like any other transaction that you entered in the general journal, you can also create the periodic journals with the same new button and everything. And I'm just taking the one that is already created here. Yeah. So this is a new one that I just created. So you take a look at this one here. I am entering the transaction same like the one that we entered in the previous video, where I have the cleaning expenses distributed between both the business units and being paid from this account. Okay, so I have just set up this, a new transaction, and the important things I'm talking and entering the data along with you right now. Okay, so if this transaction is done like every day or every week or every month, so it depends on that, you will define the unit here. So I will tell the system that, okay, so this is a kind of an entry that I typically do monthly once. Then I'll set up the unit as months for all of these lines. Monthly once. Then I'll set up the unit as months for all of these lines. I'm going to say 1 and month. So I will set it as months for all of these lines and the number of units. So I will say for every 1 month, right? So you're going to say 1 and month. It's basically every 1 month. And if you want this to be happening like every 2 months once, then you will set up the number of units as 2 here. All right. So I'm saving this transaction, and that's all. So do not enter anything in this last state for now. So system will take care of this last state. So you will understand how will that happen. So if you take a look at this one here, the periodic journals, they do not have the post button here, right? Because periodic journals can be used only as templates. So you cannot post them directly. So I'm closing this journal, and let's give a name to our journal. So I will say cleaning expenses monthly, right? So just remember this journal number as well. Okay, so this is done. Now, what do we do is, let's leave this as is, and we will go to the general journals. So I go back to the general journals, because that is where you will use your periodic journals, right? I go to the general journals, and I create a new transaction now. So whenever I want to enter such a recurring transaction using my periodic journal, what I can do is I can create a new journal, and I click on this period journal and say retrieve the journal. Okay, so when I say retrieve the journal, it will ask me to choose the journal number, which one to be retrieved. So I say this is the journal that needs to be retrieved. Okay, so this 730, right? And what do we want to do here? So do we want to copy it, or else do we want to completely move the transaction data into this journal? So typically, since it is a template, let's leave it to copy, because we want to just copy the information into this journal, right? Now enter the to date here. So every month on 7th, I want to retrieve this journal and to be able to post the transaction. So what I can do is, to date is 7th of this month, okay, which is 7th of June. All right, so leave this field, which is very rarely used. I don't want to confuse you with a lot of information at this point in time. So 7th of June, and then say OK. So since this is the first time that I'm trying to create this transaction, so I have told the system that on 7th of June, this is the first time I'm using it, right? So this is a recurring transaction that is created, right? So using the information that is available in the periodic journal, this data has been now created, correct? Now let's examine the period journal that is available. So one thing that I want you to take a look at here is, when we created this period journal, we have the data 7th of June, because that is just the creation date the system captures. Let me just refresh this. I want you to pay attention for two fields here. One is this date, and the other one is this last date. So currently last date is empty, which is like it was never used, and that is the reason when I tried retrieving the journal, system looked into that last date field, and then it gave me this result, right? So when I try refreshing this now, you see, system captures that 7th June. By the way, it already captured it. I'm refreshing the form just so that the latest values will be shown to you, right? So the last date is 7th of June. That is when this journal is last used. And you see here, this is interesting, right? The date field is updated to 7th of July. So this transaction needs to be used only in the next month. So that is the information that system captures basically. Okay. So if you try to create another periodic journal before 7th of July, then system is not going to get you the data. Okay. So let's take a look at that now. So we're done with this journal where we retrieved the data, and you can feel free to post this transaction, leave it there. Right. So I'm just closing it because I don't want to post it for time being. Now let us assume that I'm back into the general journals in the next month. So I'm coming to the lines, and what I'm doing now is I'm doing the same retrieval journal. And let us assume this time I select the same journal and copy, and this time I will take this as, let us say, 30th of June. Okay. So without knowing when exactly this journal should be posted, I'm just taking it as 30th of June, and let's say OK. So technically nothing should be copied over into this one, because this journal is eligible for eligible to be picked up only after 7th of July, right? So that is the reason you're getting this operation completed message, but you're getting no result, right? Because when was it last run? It was last run on 7th of June, right? So we said every 1 month, so it is eligible only after 7th of July, correct? So let me try to do it one more time now. Retrieve the journal, and this time I select the same journal, and let me tell the system that I want to post this now on 7th of July. Okay, now let's try to do that. So most likely this should give us the result now. Let's check this out. Yeah, wonderful. A window here. You got your journal. Let's check this out. Yeah, wonderful. So you got your journal fetched into the a window here, right? So that's awesome. So go back to the journal voucher and refresh this, and you see the last date. Okay, so last date is basically used on 7th of June, right? Currently, I did not enter into that 7th of July date, and that is how it is. But you can take a look at this one here, which is updated to the month of August. Right? So it is perfectly working. So that is how you can use the period journals to deal with your recurring transactions. So that could be your payroll entries or any expenses that will be recurring. Okay. So you might ask me then, what's the difference between the period journals and the voucher templates? So voucher templates, they can be used by the users on ad hoc basis. And when you have the definition that you want to post it every month or every 15 days, something like that, then I would recommend using the period journals. Otherwise, to help the users to speed up their data entry for some of the recurring transactions, which recur ad hoc basis, basically they never know the frequency of it, then I would recommend them to use the voucher templates. Okay, so that is the difference between both of them, and thank you so much for your time. Welcome back, everyone. In this video, we will take a look at accrual schemes. So before I show you how the accrual schemes work, I would like to show you my Excel, where we talk about why the accrual schemes are needed, right? Let us take a business scenario where we as an organization, we will be paying for the insurance, right? So let us assume that on 1st of every year, that is on 1st of January, we are paying the insurance expenses, right? So we are paying the insurance premium. So when we are booking the expense, for example, if the insurance expense is $12,000, and this is for the entire year, right? So in this case, do you book all the expense into one single month, that is 1st of January? No, you don't want to do that way, right? Because the premium is basically for 12 months, and you want to realize that expense across the months in the year instead of booking all of the expense into a single month. Correct? So that is the reason what we typically do as an accounting entry is that you credit your vendor with that $12,000, and whatever the expense that you're booking, you want to proportionately book it across different months, something like this. For every month, first, January, 1st, February, something like this, you will realize that expense across all of these months. Correct? So that is what is possible using the accrual schemes. Instead of user entering these expenses, one after another across all the months, so you can define the accrual schemes setup, using which system can automatically come up with these entries for you. All right. So let us take a look at this one in the system now to be clear. So what I'm doing is I am in the invoice journal in accounts payable module, assuming that we got an entry, we got some insurance expense that we need to book into the system, right? So I go to the lines, and then I take a vendor, so here's my vendor who provides me the insurance services. So let's enter the invoice number. So we got an invoice from this vendor, and so that is $12,000 credit. And here, let us take the insurance expense account here. Okay, so this is my insurance expense account. All right, let's not worry about the financial dimensions and just save this record. So usually when you create a transaction like this and then you post the transaction, the entire amount gets debited into this offset account, correct? So instead of doing this, what we do now is we go and define the accrual schemes, right? So firstly, I go to the functions for the line, and here I will define the ledger accruals here. So I'm telling the system to follow this accrual identification, that is 12 months accrual. Okay, so which is the base amount is $12,000. This is what we entered in the transaction basically. I'm sorry. Okay, so now I can take a look at these transactions here. Because of the reason I entered this accrual identification here, and if I look at these transactions, you take a look at this one. This is clearly spreading this amount across different months in the year, right? So you have it starting from June 1st, and it is going up till 2022, correct? So every month you're getting a realization of $1,000 into each month, isn't it? So this is possible with the ledger accruals, the accrual schemes that we are selecting there. Okay, now let's take a look at the accrual schemes. What is the setup behind the accrual identification? So you will be able to look at the accrual schemes from the GL module. So I'm going back to the module to show it to you from the front end. So I go to the general ledger, then scroll it. So under journal setup, I have this accrual schemes. So this is where you will define your accrual scheme definition, right? So let's examine this accrual scheme. Okay, so what we're doing is we are selecting a debit and credit account, which means until the expense is realized, the amount is parked into this balance sheet account. Okay, and every month this account gets credited and the expense account gets debited. Okay, so that is how that will be taken. And what is the period frequency? So how frequently you want the accrual to be realized? So I want it to be realized monthly, so I just set it to monthly. So you can use other options as quarterly and yearly. So number of occurrences by period. Okay, so certainly we need 12 periods, right? So we need it to be spread across 12 months. So that's what we're defining here. And when exactly the transaction must be posted. So when you look at this one here, post transaction, and so is it month, day, or what it is? So I set this is to be month, and it is the beginning of the month, and spread the value across the months evenly. So the expense amount is evenly spread across the different months. Okay, so if you don't want it to be equally spread across the months, and at least in the first month you want it to be based on the number of days, then you can choose this to be number of days. So which means if the expense is incurring, let's say on 7th of June, in the month of June you'll have only 30 days, right? So for the first month, you want the expense to be like posted only for 23 days. So the system can calculate the proportionate amount for the 23 days, and then it can post for the first month, right? So like that, you can do your accrual scheme definition here, and this is where we are using those accrual schemes, right? So after creating the transaction, you provide the accrual identification, the way that you want the system to realize this expense across multiple months, correct? And then just say okay. Right. So now your transaction is ready with the appropriate accruals created. And what you can do is, even before you post this transaction, what you can do is you can try printing this journal that gives you a nice view of how the transactions are getting created, right? So you take a look at these accrual schemes. I'm just enabling this, and I say print it. When you see the printed journal, so you can certainly see all the accruals that we saw in the transactions that we were looking at, right? So the realization happened across 12 months here, right? So you can see the accrual created until 2022, right? So let's close this and let's try to post this transaction now. Okay, so let me just post it. The transaction is posted. I see this message. Close this and let us take a look at voucher. Right. So you see here, this is my accounts payable control account, which is credited with $12,000, but my expense account is not hit here, right? So this is the account that we provided in the accrual scheme, and that is what is debited right now. Okay. So how do we see the transactions, those accrual scheme related transactions, right? So there is a question now. So what I'll do is, let me just take a look at this. I go to the general ledger module, and so you go to the inquiries and take a look at the voucher transactions. Yeah, sorry. So under inquiries and reports, open this voucher transactions. And here, let's just see all the voucher transactions that are posted. All right. So what I will do is, I will try to sort by the journal number so that we will see the latest transactions on top. Let me do a sort A to Z here. Okay, so you can take a look at the transactions that are posted, which are sorted by the journal number, and these all are the transactions that are posted. Okay, so you see here, so every month we have that expense for every month here. So all of these transactions are created because of the accrual schemes that we defined. Right, so that is about the accrual schemes, and that's all for this video. Thank you so much. Congratulations for finishing up this part 1 of the 3-part series, and this is the foundation that you have got to become a Dynamics 365 F&O finance consultant. Okay, so let us do a quick review of the topics that we learned and what are our next steps going to be, right? So you understood what is demo data and the Contoso companies, and you are now familiar with the navigation and how do you create the vendors in finance and operations application, right? And you also know how do you get the access to the finance and operations for your practice, right? So that is a free trial that you got to be able to practice what you learned. You now know what is procure to pay process is and where exactly finance comes into the play in the procure to pay process. You also know vendor invoice journals and how do you create them, and in which cases you will use the vendor invoice journals and in which cases you use the purchase order invoicing process. You learned how do you create new legal entities in finance and operations application, right? So if you get an application and you have no data in it, you will be able to create the new legal entity from scratch, and you are ready to implement the F&O application to your clients, right? Then you learned about the fiscal calendars and how do you create the fiscal calendars and the calendar periods within F&O. Then you also configured the ledger form, which is the heart of the finance and operations application and general ledger module. So you learned about the difference between the accounting currency and reporting currency and even transaction currency. And you also learned about how do you set these up in the ledger form, right? Then we looked at general journal creation and understood different ways of entering the transactions. So that could be entering a single line within a journal or else splitting the transaction into multiple lines within the single journal, right? Then you understood what is chart of accounts and main accounts in finance and operations terminology, right? So with that, let us see what are our next steps going to be. You completed the foundation, as I said. You will have to build on top of the foundation that is created now. Okay, so what you'll have to do is make sure that you will practice what you learned, right? So you already have the trial access, correct? So with that trial access, ensure that you practice everything that you learn and enroll into the part 2 of this course, which is already published and available. So you can see this is the title of the part 2 course, and go ahead and enroll for that. By completing all the parts of this series, you will be able to become a finance and operations finance consultant. And you will also be able to clear MB310 finance and operations certification, and you can become a certified finance consultant. Okay, so thank you so much for all your support, and thank you so much for being with me throughout this course. I will see you in the next part. All right, so do not forget to leave a good rating and review if you really liked this course. Right, thank you so much and see you. Bye. Hello everyone. In this video, we will look at the number sequences. You will understand the importance of number sequences, the creation of new number sequences, then we will look at how do you assign these number sequences to different forms. Firstly, why number sequences? Number sequences are pretty common in the business world. I am sure that you have a bank account and you always transact with your bank using a bank account number, right? So that is a unique number that is given to you from the bank. So that is nothing but a number sequence. At the same time, if you placed an order with Amazon, I am sure that you get an order number from them. So that is also nothing but a number sequence. So in the business world, it is pretty common that we need the number sequences for various forms. So let us take a look at some other forms. So there are some common forms where the number sequences are used, like vendors, where when we want to transact. Hello everyone. In this video, we will look at the number sequences. You will understand the importance of number sequences, the creation of new number sequences, then we will look at how do you assign these number sequences to different forms. Firstly, why number sequences? Number sequences are pretty common in the business world. I am sure that you have a bank account and you always transact with your bank using a bank account number, right? So that is a unique number that is given to you from the bank. So that is nothing but a number sequence. At the same time, if you placed an order with Amazon, I am sure that you get an order number from them. So that is also nothing but a number sequence. So in the business world, it is pretty common that we need the number sequences for various forms. So let us take a look at some other forms. So there are some common forms where the number sequences are used, like vendors, where when we want to transact with a vendor, we register a vendor and we assign a unique identification number to the vendor. Similarly, the customers, we record our customer and we assign a unique number to the customer. Then purchase orders. When we create a purchase order, place a purchase order to the vendor, we want the system to generate a unique number so that we can transact with the vendor using that reference number. Similarly, sales orders, where a customer places an order and we generate a unique number and give it to the customer so that he can interact with our customer support service team when he has some issues, right? Similarly, journal vouchers, where you might want to have a different number sequence for different transactions that you create. All right, so these are only a few forms that we talked about, but we have many more forms where we will need a number sequence. Okay, now let us go to the system and see how do we create the number sequence and how do we make sure that the number sequence is used whenever we create a new vendor record, a new customer record, or anything else like that. Right, I am back to my demo environment and I am currently in the USMF company. Okay, before I start creating new number sequences, I would like to take you to the vendors form by going into accounts payable, all vendors. So if I create a new vendor here, you see here currently the vendor account number, I can enter anything here because currently that is how it is set up in the USMF company in the demo data. So each client will have their own requirement, right? So likewise, the Contoso Entertainment Systems USA, they do not want a number sequence. So they want to just put a unique number whenever they create a vendor, right? So that is how it is configured right now. But let us assume that when we are implementing it to a new client and they might need a automated number being populated whenever the users create a new vendor account number, right? So that is what is our requirement. Now let us see how do we create a new number sequence and how do we associate that new number sequence so that system can automatically populate the vendor account number. Okay, so let me delete this new vendor creation. I will close this form and let us go to the organization administration module and you will see the number sequences. So remember that number sequences is a shared form and I create a new number sequence here. So when I create a new number sequence, I just give it a number sequence code. So this sequence code can be anything, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, here I say a vendor sequence, that is just a name that I'm giving, and this scope is very much important here. Based on the scope that you select, the number sequence will be available for you for selection in the parameters form. I will talk in detail about that a little later. So for time being, you choose this for company. Okay, so typically when you choose this scope as company is whenever you are creating a number sequence that is intended for a company specific form, then you're going to choose the scope as company. For example, we always talked about vendors, right? I go to the accounts payable and vendors, and this vendors form is not a shared form, meaning that the data in this form is company specific. So I am seeing the vendors that are related to only USMF company. And the new number sequence that I am creating, I want that number sequence to be available for a vendor account, right? So because of the reason this form is a company specific form, you will have to choose the scope as company. So apart from company, if you choose something else, you will not really be able to associate this new number sequence there. Okay, so define the scope as company, and for which company you would want this. So you want this for USMF company, right? I saved it. And now the segments section. In the segments section, you will define what should be the format of your number sequence. So for example, when I create a new vendor, what should this vendor account number should look like? Okay, so typically the company identifier. So in many implementations, I have seen that people may not need this company identifier if you're implementing to a single legal entity. So what I mean is, for example, if the client that you're implementing, so they have different legal entities across multiple geographical locations. So which means you will be creating multiple legal entities for them. So only in that case, probably your clients may prefer to have the number sequence format having the company ID here. Okay, otherwise you can remove this. So this is something that you can check with your clients during the requirement gathering. So during the requirement gathering, you will check with them like what is the preferred number sequence that they would like to have, right? So in this example, I don't want the company identifier, okay? And I want my vendor sequence to show something like VND hyphen the alphanumeric number. So when you say constant, so this vend keyword is going to be constant. Whenever somebody creates a new vendor, this going to be coming there as a constant. And the alphanumeric, you have the length as 9 characters here, right? So these 9 characters, these 9 alphanumeric characters will be replaced with the number. Okay, so let's scroll it down, and you see here the smallest number is going to be 1, and the largest number is based on the length of your alphanumeric characters. You're going to set up this largest number here. So automatically system will populate that for you, so you do not need to worry about it for now. Okay, I will talk about these parameters in the next video. All right, so for now, you created a new number sequence, and save this and close this. Okay, so we created a new number sequence, but how does the system know that this is the number sequence that it has to use whenever we create a new vendor, right? So that is where I will have to introduce you to the parameters form. When you go to the accounts payable, and each module will have a parameters form under setup section. So this parameters form will have important settings that are required for the implementation. Okay, at the end of the course, you will be learning about a lot of parameters. Okay, but for time being, let us not talk too much about what are the different parameters that are available. But I would like to highlight that based on the value that you select for different parameters here, your system functionality will be changing. Okay, so scroll it down, and when it comes to the number sequences now, under each parameters form, you will see a number sequences tab. Okay, so system will have the default references here. So where you are seeing vendor account as one of the references. Okay, which means already this ERP system, the finance and operations ERP system, is configured in such a way that for vendor accounts, you will be able to have a number sequence. So you might want to choose that as a manual sequence, or else you want to put that as an automated sequence. Okay, so currently I want an automated number for my vendor accounts, right? So the newly created number sequence code, I'm going to use it here. So we created the number sequence code vend sequence, right? So this is how I am telling the system that this number sequence code to be used for vendor accounts. All right, I saved this record, and now I am trying to create a new vendor account now. So let me close this. All right, go to all vendors, then create a new vendor account. You see, until just before, you were able to enter a value into this vendor account field, but now you see that the system is automatically populating a vendor account number. Okay, so that is how you can create a new number sequence and associate that new sequence to your vendor accounts. All right, so the pattern is going to be same. The way that you configure or the way that you create the number sequence and associate is not going to change for different documents. Okay. For example, if I want a new number sequence to be created for the customer records, where I go to accounts receivable and I have these customers, I open up these customers, and I will see the list of customers available in the USMF company. So since I did not open the customers form ever, it is taking a little time for the first time. So these are my customer accounts. If I create a new customer, So I can see that the customer account is again allowed to be entered manually by the end user. Okay, but if I want this to be automatically generated, then what I will do is I will have to go to this accounts receivable module, and as I was mentioning, under setup, I will have this accounts receivable parameters. Then go down to this number sequences, and you see here you have one for customer account. So currently there is a number sequence code set, but that is set to be manual, and that is the reason system is allowing the end users to manually create a number sequence. So if I want the customer account number to be automatically generated, then I will have to create a new number sequence or make some changes to this existing number sequence code. Currently in the demo data, it is configured to manually set the customer account number. Okay, so let us take a look at this one so that we understand why is it allowing us to manually set a customer account number there. Okay, so if I want to go to this particular number sequence code, as you're aware of, I will do a right click and click on view details. And you see here, the scope is same company, and it is set for USMF company. And you see here, it has a format, something like this. So it doesn't have any keyword like cust or something like that. Directly we have an alphanumeric segment. And you also see these references here. You're going to look at the number sequence, and then you know that this number sequence is used by accounts receivable customer account. Okay, and this is the important parameter. So because of the reason this is set to manual, currently system is allowing the end user to manually enter the customer account number. Okay, if I want this to be automatically generated, that is when I will switch off this manual. Then if anyone goes to accounts receivable and customers now, and they create a new customer, you see here, automatically system is populating the customer account number. Okay, so this is how you use the number sequences to automatically pop up the numbers for different records. All right, that's all for this video, and thank you very much for watching. Welcome back, everyone. This is a continuation to the previous video where we talked about the number sequences, right? In this video, you will understand the different settings available in number sequences. Then we will take a look at how do you generate the number sequences for the newly created legal entity. Then I will take you through some of the tips and tricks on resolving the number sequence related issues that you may encounter when you're working on the real projects. Let us go back to the application now. So I am back into the USMF company, and this is the number sequences that we created in the previous video, right? I am going back to the scope parameters, and let us talk about the scope parameters. So I gave you the explanation about when do you need to choose the scope as company and when do you need to choose the scope to be shared, right? So sometimes it might get a little difficult for you to understand which scope that you would want to choose. Let me show you a simple technique on figuring out the correct scope for your number sequence. All right. So I will go to the organization administration. Under number sequences, you have this segment configuration. If you open this, you will have different areas and under which you will have different references. For example, if I look at this accounts receivable, I have all these references here. Okay. For example, I want to create a number sequence for the customer account, right? Then I go to this accounts receivable area because I know that customer is part of accounts receivable. Then I click on this customer account and you see the segments here. So when you see the segments showing as company, so then that means the number sequence that you create for this particular reference, you will have to use the scope as company. Okay. And certain number sequences, you will not see any segment here. And that actually means that the scope should be shared. Okay. Let me just take you to another one here. Under purchase module, I have purchase requisition. Okay, so purchase requisition is a shared form, and that is the reason you see no segment here. So which means if you are creating a new number sequence and that is for purchase requisition, then you will have to create the scope as shared. Okay, so let's take a quick look at it. So I am taking you to the procurement and sourcing area. So I go to the purchase requisitions. So this is not much into the finance area. The purchase requisitions are basically the internal requests. If anyone in the organization need to request anything to be purchased, they will create a purchase requisition. Okay, and this is actually a shared form, and you see here, this is the purchase requisition number. So you have a number here, right? So this particular number is a shared. So the number sequence for this purchase requisition should be having the scope as shared. All right. So that is about the segment configuration. Let us go back to the number sequences once again. So I open up the number sequences form, and the one that we created is event sequence, right? I open up this number sequence that we created and scroll it down. And let us take a look at these references. So we have attached this particular number sequences in the accounts payable parameters number sequence vendor account reference, right? So let us go to that place. I go to accounts payable and parameters. So I went to this number sequences and I attached this particular number sequence code to my vendor account reference, right? So this is one way of attaching your number sequence to a reference. So the other way is, let me just quickly show it here. I edit this number sequence and scroll it down. So let me just remove it, so that way it is easier for you to understand. I say yes, and I go back to this one, and let me just refresh the screen. So basically you will see that number sequence reference gone in this form as well. Okay, so you can either go to the parameters and then look for your reference and then attach it, or otherwise you can go to the references in the same form that you created the number sequence, and in the area you choose accounts payable. Ignore that error. This must be something related to my build issue. Let me do one thing. Let me attach this to my customer account. So I go to the accounts receivable area and choose the customer account. Okay, so now this same number sequence is associated to my customer account, right? So I did not go to the parameters form and associated this, but still if I go to my accounts receivable area and then look at my number sequences, so this form is already opened before I did the changes in the other tab. So let me refresh this so that my change can be reflected here. Yeah, you see here? So I told the system that this is the new number sequence that it should be using for the customer account. Okay, so that is how you can attach the newly created number sequence to your required reference. All right, now let us look at these parameters here. So you see this in use flag here. Basically, you will not be able to edit this parameter. It tells you that this number sequence code is already in use because it is attached to a reference, right? So that is the reason it tells you that it is already in use. Okay, and sometimes you might want to stop the number sequence because you don't want people to create any more vendor records, just for example, or else you do not want to allow the users to create the purchase orders in the system because there must be some problem within the organization, and we want to stop people from creating the number sequences temporarily. Or else sometimes you want to permanently block this number sequence be used in any other places. So in such cases, what you can do is you say stopped, and anybody tries to create this one, they'll be getting the problem. Okay, so let me do one thing. I will set this back to my vendor account because that is the example that we have been taking, right? So I set it back and I come over here and refresh the screen. You see, currently the same number sequence is being used for both customers and vendors. Okay, but we do not want this anymore, right? So let us just remove this off. Right, so this is done. So now we said that this number sequence must be stopped. So let's just save this. I go to accounts payable and all vendors. Right. So if I try to create a new vendor now, you see here, so this particular number sequence is on hold. Okay, so that is how system will stop you from using that number sequence anymore. All right, let me just take this off. And what about this manual? So this is something that we have already seen in the previous video, right? If this number sequence is set to manual, and that is where when you create a new vendor account, system will allow you to manually enter the vendor account number. Okay, and the important one is this continuous. So what will happen with the continuous sequence? So to be able to explain you, let me take you back to the vendors creation. And now that we removed the stopped flag on the number sequence, right? Let's go to the vendor and see if system will allow me to do that. So you can see here system is already allowing me to create this vendor account, right? Because the stopped flag is unselected now. Okay, and currently you can see here the continuous flag is set to no, but still obviously I'm getting a continuous number, right? That's how it looks like. But here is the difference. For example, the purchasing agent or somebody from the accounts payable team initiated this vendor creation, and probably they do not have enough information, and immediately they wanted to delete this particular vendor because they do not know which group that this vendor needs to be associated to, and they'll have to reach out to their manager for that information. So the user chose to delete the vendor creation process, and for example, next day he comes in and tries to create a new vendor. You see here, earlier the vendor account number was 2, and now it is already showing that as 3, right? But honestly speaking, the number 2 is never used in the system. So sometimes these missing numbers will sort of create or raise some questions like, where these numbers have gone. Or else sometimes there will be some statutory requirements where the numbers should be continuous. Okay, in such cases, you're gonna set this flag to continuous. Then what happens is that when somebody initiates the record creation and then they'll delete it for some reason, the generated number will be stored within the system. So when the next user comes in, or the same user comes in later, and they create the vendor record or any record, then the previous number will be still used. Okay, let us take a look at it. How does that work? I'm gonna delete this one, and so I say this is to be continuous. Save this, and you see this one. System is telling me that the change of number sequence may create inconsistency because already there may be some numbers missing, right? And now we are trying to set it to continuous. So it just gives me a message. So that's fine. And let us close this. So do not worry about this one. So sometimes you look at this, cannot edit a record in number sequences form. So the record shown has been updated by another user. So sometimes what happens is that you are in this particular form, and let us assume that someone else opened the same form and they made some changes before you. So which means the data that you are looking at in this particular form and for this particular record is not really current, right? So you're seeing some different data than the latest data. In such cases, system gives you this message that you're not seeing the latest data. Okay, so then what you have to do is that Shift Control F5. So that is something that you can do. Otherwise, since it is a browser, you can just refresh it. And let's search for that again. So you might wonder, like, who changed something on this form and why are we getting that error, right? So in this case, what happened is that system changed the data in this particular form. So basically what system does is every time a new vendor has been created, system automatically updates the next number that should be picked up. Okay, so that is the reason earlier the next number was 3, and now the system says that the next number is 4. Okay, so that is the reason I got that message. Now let me go to this vendors and let us create this vendor account. You see here, I got number 4 and I deleted this. Fine, let me create this again. So I have number 5, that is all right. Number 6, which means there is some problem because technically it should have taken the number. Oh yeah, you remember? We got that message, right? And system did not save the setup that we did, and that is the reason it was giving us an error because we are changing the configuration on some old record. So this time I set it to be continuous. So my setting is saved now, and let us go to the vendors now to see how this continuous will affect the vendor creation process. I go and create a new vendor now, and let us see this. So you see this number 7, right? And obviously you cannot edit this vendor account number. Fine. So delete this and try to create it again. You see here, so system is still taking the number 7. So even in a case where multiple users across the company start the vendor creation process and for some reason they all delete the vendor that is being created, system can store those numbers that are generated, and then system can reuse those numbers basically. So that is the reason the continuous is important when you want to have the continuous numbers for your records. Okay, so let me just delete this one here and let us go to the number sequences. And how is system remembering this number 7? Okay, so like that, I said if multiple users try that and then delete the vendor that is being created, all those numbers will be maintained in this status list. Okay, if you go to that status list, once the number is generated and it's been deleted by the user, that number will be stored here. So system keeps a track of who created it and what time this number has been generated and all that. Okay, so that is how the continuous will be helpful. And you do have a couple of settings here. So far in my experience, I have never used it, and I don't think you will be in a situation of using it, but just for the sake of understanding, when you set this to be like allow user changes to a higher number, so then what happens is that when somebody is creating a vendor and system populates a number, right? For example, they're gonna get the number 7. Okay, So when they get the number 7, they will be able to change the number to a higher number. Okay, because this is set. So let's just go there. And sometimes what happens is that when you make some changes in one tab, and if you have the other tab open, then your changes might not take effect. So that is the reason I will recommend that, and at least during your learning, probably you might want to close and reopen the forms. Okay, so I'm trying to create a new vendor, and you see here. So a couple of minutes before, I was showing this explicitly, right? Earlier, you were not able to edit the vendor account number, right? Because system automatically generated it, and you were not able to edit this, right? But now that our setting has changed, where allow user changes, where user can change it to a higher number, right? This is what is our setup is. So because of this reason, if you go to this vendors and system generated a number, but still it is allowing me to change it to something else. Okay, I can put it to a higher number, but not to a lower number. Okay, for example, I change it to something like 6, and you see, okay, firstly it's giving me the error about the group, and I save it. You see here, it is telling me that the number sequence does not allow change to a lower number. Okay, however, I can change this to, let us say, 10. So this is acceptable. Fine. It is asking me the name. All right. So that is how you can use this setting that is available here. All right. Now, so as I mentioned, the next number will be automatically updated by the system based on the number that is last generated. Okay. So you have your smallest, largest, and the next numbers, and this one is automatic cleanup. Okay, it has some beautiful description here. I recommend you to just go through this for a better understanding, but let me also explain this. What does it do? So we now set the number sequence parameters to be continuous, right? Which means we do not want any numbers to get lost. But sometimes what happens is that when the system crashes happen or power failures, so in such cases, a system will not be able to store that number that is generated when the user starts a record creation. Okay, so in such cases, still because of the statutory requirements or business requirements, we still need no numbers be missing in our vendors, right? Or else, and any records for which we configure the continuous number sequencing. So in such cases, this automatic cleanup will be really helpful. Okay, so what you do here is you will enable this cleanup and then set up an interval. So what actually this means? So I'm telling the system to retrieve the numbers that are missing. For example, because of the power failure, the number 7 is not stored in the status list. Then still, system can get into the database and see like which is that missing number. For example, number 6 is generated and then it jumped to the number 9 or number 10. Okay, so those missing numbers, system will be able to get them and keep them in the status list. So whenever the user creates, system can automatically populate that missing number there. Okay, so that is about this cleanup. And for performance reasons, sometimes you can use this pre-allocation if it is a not continuous number. So in this case, since we set this flag to continuous, I'll not be able to activate this one. But what is this one, the pre-allocation? Let me just quickly take you to the journal names. So there are many places within the system where you might need a number. I'm sorry, I meant to go to the journals, not the journal names. Let me go to the general journals. Okay, so as I was mentioning, there are many places where you might need a number for system purposes. Like if you take this vendors, customers, and purchase orders, sales orders, so these places, you need a unique number for business purposes. But there are certain places where you will need a number only for the system purposes. One of those examples is this one, journal batch number. So technically in the business, you do not really make use of this journal batch number. But each journal that you create, system needs a unique number to be maintained. Right? So like this, there are many places where you might just have a number for system purposes, right? In such cases, what you can do is you can tell the system to pre-allocate some numbers. So you set this pre-allocation to yes, and then you can put some quantity of numbers as 10. Then what actually happens is that whenever somebody creates a new number, system, instead of generating one single number, it generates 10 numbers because we have this quantity of numbers, right? So we're going to set it to 10. So it will generate 10 numbers and it just keeps that in the memory. So otherwise, if you do not set it up, then what happens is that every time that you create a record, then it calls the system related classes and then generate a new number every time. So for that reason, this option is given, but it is not really popular or it is not really used by many implementations. Okay, if at all we want to use this, probably until and unless if it is really taking time for you, that system generating a new number is taking time, then probably you can think of activating this. Otherwise, I don't think you have to use this. Okay, so that is about it. And one last thing with which we can close this lecture is generating the new number sequences. So before I do that, I would like to take you to the SGPC company, our new legal entity. And if you go to accounts payable and, for example, you go to the parameters and number sequences, you see that all my number sequences are empty here because this is a newly created legal entity, right? So we are implementing SGPC for our practice purposes. And here, it is going to be a huge effort for you to create all these number sequence codes. And not only here, even in your implementation, it's going to be a very tedious process for you to create the number sequences for everything. But at the same time, that is mandatory for the system. You will have to have them, right? However, as I was mentioning, there are a lot of places where business really do not have a number sequence requirement. So they might need a number for purchase orders, but they don't care what number that you're giving for your journal batch numbers, right? But when it comes to vendors, they can tell you that my vendor sequence should be something like vend-001. And my customer sequence should be something like this. They start with 10001, something like this. But they cannot have a requirement for each and everything that system needs. Okay, for example, this closing voucher, they don't really have any specifications. So like that, at least 80% of the number sequences, customer or client doesn't really care what number that is coming up there. Okay, so for this reason, what we normally do in the implementation is we gather the requirement of which number sequences are required for the business. Like when we're doing the requirement gathering discussions, we talk to them like, what is the number sequence that you need for the vendor and customer? So like that, based on the business processes, we gather the number sequence formats. But the rest of them, what we do is we automatically generate a number sequence. So let us do this here. I go to the number sequences and I use this generate option. So what this will do is this will generate the number sequences for all the references. Then on top of it, whichever the ones that you want a specific format, then you go ahead and override that particular number sequence reference. Okay, so this is what it tells you. Okay. So to start with, you see here, accounts payable, vendor account. So it is popping up with the particular number sequence code and what is the smallest number and what is the largest number and all this. And so like this you have for all of your references. Okay. So if I want to include the company identifier, then I can leave it as is. Otherwise, I can say remove scope from format. So when I just say this, this SGPC will go off from here. So if I want to do it for multiple ones, I can select all of them or some of them and then say remove scope from format. Okay, so I don't want to do any changes. So let me go ahead, next, and finish it. So this will technically take some time. So that is done. And what we do now is, let us go to the accounts payable and parameters, number sequences, you see here. So system populated the number sequence codes automatically. Okay, so as I was mentioning, if you have a specific format requirement for vendor account, then yeah, go to this number sequence code. You don't even need to change your number sequence code. Just go ahead and change your format. All right, so instead of SGPC, I need this to be VND hyphen, and I don't want this company identifier. All right, so this is how you can generate the number sequences. All right, thank you so much for watching. Hello everyone. In this video, you will learn about financial dimensions. I will take you through the new financial dimensions creation, and you will learn about how do you use the financial dimensions when you're creating the transactions. Then I will introduce you to the custom dimensions and entity-backed dimensions. All right. What are these financial dimensions? Financial dimensions give meaningful information to the posted transactions. They will enable organizations to get required financial reports and gain insights from the data. All right. Let me take you back to the application to better explain what these financial dimensions are and how they are used. I'm taking you back to the general journals. So we used general journals to create transactions in our previous lectures. Let me create a new journal and take the journal name here, then go to the lines. So every time that I was creating a transaction, I was taking an account, and when I click this lookup, I was selecting some random values in these business units, departments, and other fields, right? And I always mentioned that you will learn about them a little later, and this is the right time that we talk about them. So when you are entering this travel expense, and I want to mention more details about this travel expense is by which department. So that is where I can enter this human resources, right? So these are nothing but these financial dimensions. I'm selecting human resources as my department here, right? So likewise, currently in the USMF data, I have these 4 financial dimensions, okay? So that is how financial dimensions will help you to give more details about your transactions. All right. So let me go to the offset account here. And even when I come here and I select the petty cash account, okay, by default, the department that I selected in the account will be coming up here, right? So in this case, this is what we want. Fine. So throughout the application, wherever you select a main account, where you have your account type as ledger, and you select a ledger account or main account, then you will see the financial dimensions next to those accounts. So that is where you can enter the financial dimensions and post the transaction. Okay, so now we know how do you enter the financial dimensions, right? So let us go back to the presentation, and we will discuss about a few more things about the financial dimensions. Let me just quickly explain you about organization structure. An organization usually be divided into smaller groups with specific tasks and roles. So usually many of the organizations have business units, departments, and cost centers as part of their structure. And those are actually some of the common dimensions. That's where even we saw the same business unit, department, and cost center as our financial dimensions in the Contoso demo data USMF company. However, based on the customer reporting requirement, different financial dimensions need to be configured. Okay, so some of the common financial dimensions could be these: business unit, department, cost center, vendor group, even a customer group, item group, a bank group, right? So like this, based on the reporting requirement, the client might need different financial dimensions. And that is why these financial dimensions can be created based on the business requirement. So in the Contoso demo data, though we have that business unit, department, and other ones, if the client needs something else, you will be able to configure them for your customer or client. Let us understand the importance of having the financial dimensions in the system. So if you look at this entry here, this is typically an entry that we create without the dimensions, where we say the travel expense account to be debited with $1,000, while the petty cash account gets credited with $1,000. So in this case, we are not getting the meaningful information that to which department that this transaction is happening for, right? However, if you look at these transactions here that have the dimensions, when I'm entering a transaction, I select the travel expense account and the HR department, and another entry where the account is travel expense and the department is marketing, right? So like this, business can get more details about the transaction that are being entered by business users. When users enter this data, business decision makers or financial controllers get some insights from this transactional data. Let me take my notepad to explain how is this helpful. If we do not have the financial dimensions, when we want to see the travel expenses of the company for the period 2020, we will just know that the travel expenses are like 10,000 US dollars, right? Or else let's take it as 50,000 US dollars. However, what if, being the business head or a financial controller of the company, we want to understand these travel expenses are incurred by which departments? Because in the future, I want to control these expenses. We want to control these expenses so that we don't go overboard with these expenses, right? So what if we get some insights like travel expenses by HR department is 20,000 or else maybe 10,000, and travel expenses by marketing department is 20,000, and finance is other 20,000, right? So this way, we're gonna get some meaningful insights from the transactional data, right? So this is not just for expenses. It could be even for your revenues. I want to look at the revenues by the customer group. Like the revenue that is generated by domestic customers is something like $1 million, and the revenue that is generated by foreign customers is $20,000, right? So like this, we can use financial dimensions to get those meaningful insights from the transactional data. Now, let me take you back to the application so that we look at how do we pull those reports that will give those meaningful insights from our data. We created this journal where we selected HR department and we have a debit of $3,000, right? So I'm going ahead to post this particular transaction. So this transaction is posted. All right. Now let me just open up a new tab, and this time I would like to take you to the trial balance. So this is the first time that you're looking at the trial balance from finance and operations application. I will go to general ledger, and under inquiries and reports, I look at this trial balance. So here, I want to pull my trial balance for 2020 period, right? So I have the from date as 1/1/2020 and the to date is this one. Okay. So here, firstly, I want to take this financial dimension set as main account. So what is this financial dimension set? You're going to learn about that just in a few minutes. Let me just calculate the balances here. So this will show me my balances for all my accounts. So for the year 2020, we have only these 2 accounts involved because that is a demo data that we have been using, and we posted transactions for only these 2 accounts. Okay, so if you look at this one here, this tells me like currently the travel expenses that are incurred in the current year is $4,000, but this is not giving me any information like which department incurred it, right? So that is where I can use that financial dimension set here. So I will be able to tell the system to go and get the trial balance for main account plus department. And then I say calculate balances. So my trial balance is summarized. So my trial balance is summarized by main account and department. So like that, you can also choose your financial dimension set to be main account plus business unit plus department, right? So if you look at this one here, so we have the travel expense, and currently all the travel expense transactions that we posted in the system, we have selected human resources as the department. And that is the reason that you are seeing here, the entire $4,000 is spent by human resources, right? So let us do one quick thing now. I will close this voucher and then create, or else probably take another one that is already available here and go ahead and create this transaction. So this time, instead of human resources, let me just click this lookup and I will take IT department. Okay, I'm going to put a debit of 5,000. So I will select IT department even here. Okay, and let me go ahead and post this one. So this journal is posted, and I will try to recalculate this trial balance. Yeah, you see here, my travel expenses are being summarized by department because of the fact that we selected the financial dimension set as main account plus department. Even these financial dimension sets also can be created by us. We will learn about that later, right? So this is how I can see the information, right? So if I don't want to see the transactional data by department and I want that to be summarized by main account, I can choose this to be main account here and say calculate balances. So I'm going to see the summarized view of these travel expenses, right? So that way, financial dimensions are really useful to get the summarized view by the department or business unit or whichever the dimension that you have for your implementation. All right. Now, I will take you through the financial dimensions creation process now. So as I was mentioning, you can create whichever the financial dimensions that are required for your business. So to be able to create the financial dimensions, you will go to the general ledger module and dimensions, financial dimensions. You will see all the dimensions that are already available in the Contoso data. Please note that this is a shared form, meaning no matter in which company that you're creating the financial dimension, that financial dimension can be seen from all the companies. Okay, so I will create a new financial dimension. So when I am creating the financial dimension, I will have an option here, use values from. When you click this one, I can say that this is a custom dimension, or else I can pick one of these entity values here. So this is what I was talking about, where the custom dimension versus entity-backed dimension. Okay, so for example, you know the process of how do you create the vendor, right? So if I want vendor to be my financial dimension, what I can tell the system is that I want vendor to be my financial dimension. So the dimension name is vendor, because there may be already one financial dimension available with the vendor financial dimension name. So that's the reason I'm just saying vendor new. So I should not have the hyphens there. So updates to a dimension will not take effect until dimension activation is run. Okay, so the new dimension will not be available until you activate the dimension. So that is just an informational thing. Just close it. Okay. So we told the system that this is a new dimension that we want to use, and the values for this particular dimension should be coming from my vendors table, right? So that is the reason if you go to this dimension values, you will see all the vendors that are available across all the companies. Okay, so that is entity-based dimensions or entity-backed dimensions. And if you want to create a new dimension, the custom dimension, you can choose this to be a custom dimension, and probably I want to create a new dimension called department for Singapore. Okay, so we created Contoso Singapore legal entity, right? So assuming that this is a fresh implementation and we have no departments, I'm creating a new financial dimension called department, but I'm just using the keyword SG here so we can easily identify that this is something that we created. Okay, and when I say this is a custom dimension, and when I click this dimension values, I see nothing here. Okay, so this is where I go and tell, like, typically it is a best practice that you use the dimension value with a number when you have multiple or a huge set of dimension values. So I can say finance department, and I can say HR, and then sales and marketing. Right? So this is how you create the financial dimension, and you will create the financial dimension values as well. Okay, now let me close this. And as I was mentioning, the dimensions table is a shared table, and that is the reason even if you go to any company, like so even if I go to SGPC company and look at my dimensions, because we created our financial dimensions from USMF company, but I'm going to SGPC company and general ledger financial dimensions. So you're gonna see the, so I want to search for department SG, right? So that is the reason I'm saying star SG, that gives me all the records that ends with SG, right? So I have department SG, right? So this is done, and you might get a question here. We have many dimensions here. So you have many dimensions here, right? Like agreement, bank account, business unit, campaign, customer, a lot more dimensions. But if you go to your journal vouchers, so what are the different dimensions that you're seeing in the USMF company? Let me just focus here. Or else, let me create a new journal to make it easier. Right. So if I take this account here, 601500, and what are the dimensions that you're seeing here? You're seeing only business unit and department, right? But why is it so? We have many dimensions here, right? Okay, let us park that question. I'm sorry. So you're seeing business unit, department, cost center, and item group. You're seeing only 4 dimensions here. And if you look at the offset account here, and you select this account, and you're seeing only business unit and department. But why not even those 4 dimensions that you're seeing here for this account? Or again, when you're looking at this account, why not even the other dimensions that you have here, right? So park that question aside for now, and that is our discussion topic in our next lecture, where we talk about account structures. All right? Thank you so much for watching. In this video, you will learn about account structures. To be able to explain you about account structures, let me directly jump into the application. And let us start with the question that we parked aside in the previous video. So what was the question? Let me go to the general journals. So the question was, when we create a journal and get into the lines and select an account here, like travel expense. So the moment that I select an account here, I am seeing the dimensions here. I'm seeing these 4 dimensions. And we discussed in the last lecture that it is not that every organization will need the same financial dimensions, right? Every client will have their own requirement. So only in the Contoso demo data, we are seeing these dimensions. But the dimensions that are required by different clients may be different, right? So it is important that we know, like, from where the system will get these financial dimensions, correct? Now, let us see how are we getting these financial dimensions here, okay? And at the same time, when I select a different account here, for example, we were taking this petty cash account, right? I typed petty cash account, and I selected this account here, and this time you are seeing only 2 dimensions. So what is the story about this one? Right? So one account we are seeing 4 dimensions, and the other one we are seeing only 2 dimensions. So firstly, where these dimensions are coming from and why different dimensions based on the account that we select. Okay, so let me go to account structures. To understand where these are coming from, I will need to take you to the ledger form. Under general ledger, I have the ledger form right here under ledger setup. So I mentioned that this is a very critical form for you where you have the core setups for the company available here. Okay, and we talked about these different fields here, and this is something that we are going to discuss about now, account structures. So in the ledger form, we are going to create, or we are going to add some structures. So what is this structure? So let me just open up this structure here. If I click this, automatically system will take me to the form where the structure is configured, right? So this is my structure. So if in case you want to go to this particular form from the front end directly, what do? You go to the, otherwise you can simply search for, I'm sorry. You can simply search for configure accounts structure. Okay, then you will see this configure accounts structures form. So when you open this one, you will see all the structures that are available in the demo data. Okay, but if it is a fresh implementation, obviously you will see nothing here, right? And we need to create our own structure. Okay, so this is how you open the account structure, and you can search for the one that you want. So for now, let's go to this one here, because this is the one that is connected to our USMF company, right? Because we went to the ledger form and then we found this account structure, right? So we have 3 different structures here. Firstly, let's focus on the first structure, right? So what is it saying here? So here, it is defined in such a way that for all the accounts which are starting from 1000000 to 39999. So for all these accounts, system should show only these 2 dimensions. So that is how it is configured. Okay, and that is the reason when I select an account that is falling within this particular range, then I will see only these 2 dimensions. Okay. Now let us go back to the journal to verify what we understood is correct. Right? I am going back to the journal voucher, and then I am taking an account that is starting with, let us say, 399, or else that starts with 3, right? I'm taking this account, and you see here I am having only 2 segments here. So business unit, and the other one is department. That's it, right? So that is what is configured in our account structure. Okay, now let us go back to our ledger form, and what is the next structure that is linked to this particular ledger? So that is P&L structure. So if you go to this particular structure, and forget about these values here, we are going to talk about them a little later. And if you look at only these financial dimensions that are available here, you see that this structure has 4 dimensions, right? And let us go and check this. You see here, all the accounts that are starting from 4000000 to this one, you should see these 4 dimensions. So that is how it is configured. Now let me go back here, and I will change this account, and I will take any of the expense accounts. So I'll take this purchase expense. Okay, and you see here I'm seeing 4 segments here. These are called segments, and 4 segments and 4 dimensions. Okay, so the same dimensions that we have in the structure are being shown in the segments. Okay, so that is how the dimensions will get populated based on the accounting structure. Fine. Now let us understand this a little bit more. So what if we want to create a new accounting structure? Right? So let us go to the account structure, and I will also discuss about why do you need to have multiple structures, right? Why business really need multiple structures in the business scenarios, right? I will go to the configure account structures form. Okay, if you would like to navigate to that particular form through this one, go to the general ledger module, and then you will find chart of accounts, dimensions, and then you have the structures here. Okay, so you open up this configure account structures, right? So this is how you go to that particular form. Then you create your own structure here, right? Now I am taking a business case here where our newly created company SGPC needs a new structure, right? So let us configure a new structure called SGPC. So I want to represent my company name in the structure name. So that is the reason I'm using SGPC keyword here, and I say balance sheet. Okay, So I'm creating a new structure, and by default I want the main account to be added as the dimension. So I have the main account, and I would like to add the newly created department, right? So if you remember in the previous videos, I've shown you how do you create the financial dimension, right? So you just click on this add segment. Sorry, please cancel this one. So by mistake, I have clicked on this add button. That is the reason the system is giving me some issues here. Just remove this and try to add a segment here. So the new financial dimension that we created is department SG is the one that we created. But if I look at this one here, I don't see that department SG here, right? Even if you try to look for it, you don't see the department here. Why? So let us go back to this one. Let us go back to our financial dimensions. So to go to financial dimensions, I can search for the financial dimensions here. Even if you're not in that particular form, search for financial dimensions and you can go there, right? So click on the financial dimensions, and so you are seeing this message, right? Updates to a dimension will not take effect until dimension activation is run, right? So last time we created the financial dimension, but we did not run the activation. And that is the reason if you look at your newly created financial dimension, system is telling me that this is inactive, right? Even you can see the status here, this is inactive. So how do you activate this dimension? So you will be able to activate your newly created dimension by clicking on this activate. Okay. However, in this case, if I try to click this activate button here, you see I'm getting a warning message here. So system is actually not allowing me to activate this particular dimension. So let us just read what is it telling us. So the activation of dimension is only allowed when the system is in maintenance mode. So the maintenance mode can be enabled in this environment by running the maintenance job from LCS. So what is this? So I intentionally did not activate this particular dimension because that is pretty common that you will encounter these kind of issues in your real life projects, right? So sometimes what happens is that you will try to create your account structure and you will be looking for your financial dimension, okay? And then you see the dimension is not showing up here. Then you'll be thinking about, oh, I have created this dimension, but why is it not showing up there? So the reason behind that is the activation is not run. And to be able to activate the dimension, the system must be brought into the maintenance mode. So you can get the system into the maintenance mode through LCS. So LCS is a short form of Lifecycle Services, which is a web portal used for managing the Dynamics 365 finance and operations environments. At the end of this course, I will give you a brief introduction about the Lifecycle Services and a few basic things that you should be knowing in the Lifecycle Services web portal and how do you manage some of the environments. Okay, so there are only a few tasks that will really need you to get the system into the maintenance mode. And one of those tasks is this one, activating the financial dimension. So it is mainly because of the reason that when you activate the dimension, system has to do some table schema level changes in the background. And that is the reason Microsoft designed it in such a way that you will have to get the system into the maintenance mode. Okay, so to be able to do that, you can definitely approach your technical consultant or a developer who is working with you in that particular project, so they can help you with getting the system into the maintenance mode. So there will be an option in the Lifecycle Services where you go to that particular environment and then click a button to get the system into the maintenance mode. Okay, so once that is done, then you will be in a position to go ahead and activate the particular dimension. Okay, so once the dimension is active, only then you will be able to make it part of your structure. Fine. So for time being, what I will do is, because our intention in this video is to activate or create a new accounting structure, right? So let us go ahead with an existing financial dimension that is already active. Okay, and certainly I will also get this department SG dimension activated so that we can use it for our Singapore entity. Okay, so for now, what I'm doing is, instead of taking the department SG, I'm taking this department as my financial dimension that I need. Okay, let me say add the segment. And you see, I now see the department as my dimension. Then, oh, I did the same mistake, but let me just explain you here. So there should not be any overlapping main accounts when you're defining the accounting structure. So if I try to save this one, so that is where system will give me some problem here. The row with the department star overlaps with the row with the other star. Okay, so what basically happens is that you can use this column to define certain conditions. So what departments can be selected? So to be able to accommodate those scenarios, so your main account should not be overlapped. So I will discuss a little bit more about this overlapping and all that as we go forward. So for now, just remove this one. Say yes, close this one, and save it. Now you will not get any errors. Now, if I have to add another dimension, I just add segment. and then I need the department. So just think about this as something that we are mimicking the configuration for USMF company. Okay, so I want to take a department, sorry, I want to take a cost center, right? So I can take a cost center here. Okay, so that way you can create your accounting structure. Fine. Now, let us take a look at our account structure that is there for USMF company, right? Oh, so look like there's a small problem here. Yeah. So I open up this ledger and I'm going back to this particular account structure, right? Now, how do you select this main account here? How do you tell the system that this business unit and department must be showing up only for these accounts, right? So let us just mimic this configuration as well. I go to my account structure and here I'm focusing on this main account field here. Okay, so after I do that, you see here, so this is where I can define it. So this structure is for which all the accounts, right? When I focus on the particular main account, system tells me that where main account is like star, which means no matter what is there in the main account, we need to see the department and cost center. So in the journey